Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another special episode and another special guest. Ethan, thank you for joining me. I know there's I was just telling you now before the call, I have some new ways of introducing people. So I would say from the outsider's perspective, you're working with Octagon, you're still in school at Georgetown, you're filming content on the side. But if someone meets you at like a dinner one night or at the bar, how do you introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's a tough one because even within my job, finding the right way to introduce myself is hard. And then you start tacking on these other things. But I usually tell people that I work for a sports agency, specialize in partnerships, marketing, and events. And then we'll see if people dig in deeper after that or not.
No, you're spot on. I started explaining my job title, and as I'm explaining it, I can see the interest level or the understanding level kind of go up or down. And then I kind of like change up the topic based on what their response is. It's always like an awkward situation at first.
Right. It's like, do you want the 3-minute description or are we asking to be nice?
The full LinkedIn profile or just the quick chat? No, that's funny. But yeah, I'm glad we got to sit down today. I think we kind of connected at first over just the sports business industry as a whole, what it's like getting into it, kind of the inside and outs of it. And I really just wanted to sit down and have like a quick conversation. So I think first off, if we start with maybe your journey, giving a kind of quick introduction into what you mentioned there, sort of what your work looks like now. And then that initial maybe first step in the door, what it actually took to get into the sports business industry. And then we'll kind of break things down as we go through the conversation.
Yeah. So right now I work at Octagon. We're a sports agency, two different sides of the business. So there's the traditional talent representation that people think of when you talk sports agency. Then there's our marketing division. We focus on corporate partners, and whether it's experiential marketing, events, strategy, consulting, we're kind of a full one-stop shop to help corporations activate their sports sponsorships and partnerships. And so I've bounced around over my 2.5 years at Octagon, touched on almost each and every one of the different verticals that we have. And now I work within our client services division. So it's consulting, a client advising, really working at a high level with the decision makers at the companies and helping them decide which direction should they go in with their sponsorships. How can we provide analytics and metrics to help them make better decisions and ultimately just kind of make it a smoother process for someone who might not have a background in sports marketing or in sports partnerships. And it's been a roller coaster to how I got here. This wasn't what I expected to be doing, especially when I went into college. Both my parents work in medicine, and I was certain I was going to be a doctor too. And there's always kind of that thread of working in sports. I thought my dream job was to be a team doctor, working with a team, being the ortho guy. Somebody gets hurt, I'd be the one to lead their care. But it took 1 year of college for me to figure out that was not going to be for me. And thankfully I'd gotten involved already on campus, and worked with the athletic department, in a smaller capacity. And that kind of led to me, getting my foot in the door and, launching this career basically, in the sports industry.
So if we go back to, you kind of mentioned like if you look back at like your high school self or just getting into college, sort of the perception that you had of what your life would turn out to be or your career and how things have changed. If we go back now and let's say there's a 16-year-old, someone in the middle of high school looking at, hey, maybe the sports business industry is interesting. I'm not really sure what I want to do. What would be your first, like, I'm already thinking of the content that you make. So like, what would be some of your first questions or like topics that you would want to cover with, just say you're having a one-on-one with a high schooler and they're asking like, look, what are the first steps I should take? What should I be doing now to kind of prepare? So if you went back to like your 16-year-old self, what would you say? Like, hey, start doing this or maybe try this out or go talk to that person. What would be those like first initial steps for you?
Yeah, I think the two big things, one is figuring out which direction you want to go. And that's something that I struggled with, mostly because I didn't really understand all the different avenues that were out there. I grew up in a smaller town. The people that I knew, my friends' parents weren't working in the sports industry. And so I kind of had a limited view into the options that were out there. And so I think like just getting on LinkedIn, LinkedIn has a mixed reputation. People think it's cringe, and an aspect of it is, but there's no better place to really see what's out there as far as jobs, projects people are working on, being able to follow people that work in the industry, hear their successes, hear their shortcomings, the ups and downs of their jobs and what it's like to work in the business, I think can have a big impact on understanding what you want to do. So first, I think you got to nail down a direction. It might change, but that's not a big deal as long as you have something that you can start working towards,
Yeah.
right? And then I think the other, biggest thing you can do in high school at that level is start to volunteer, get your feet wet a little bit. It's really easy to get involved when you're in high school. You're supposed to be volunteering anyways, for your college apps. It's like a big thing your advisor is going to be telling you to do. And people are really willing to help out, people that age. And you're in a setting where you're around high school sports naturally. And it's very, easy to seamlessly kind of find opportunities to get involved at that level. So if you want to do sports broadcasting, how can I, get involved with announcing at a basketball game at school? If I want to do photography or videography, can I reach out to one of the coaches and see if I can come shoot photos, on the field at the football game? There's all these little ways to get involved, and then that continues to help you refine. One, is this something that I want to do? And also, two, start to build a little bit of experience, get a portfolio. So when you go to college or go into that next step after you graduate high school, you have a little bit of credibility when you're reaching out for your next opportunity.
So you mentioned there on LinkedIn, like kind of as a starting point, which I think is key. I looked back, it was funny actually the other day. I think I've been on LinkedIn for like 12 years. My dad told me when I was like really, like I would have been like 14 or maybe 14, somewhere around there. And he just said like, hey, just join this and you'll thank me one day. And I kind of just left it for years because I didn't really know what to put on it or what to do. But like you're saying, slowly over time, I started following people, started posting even just little things, my volunteer experience or what I was planning on that week, or just something I found interesting about a specific article. Like, I don't think you need this like vast of like, I'm a CEO of this 6-figure company and I'm doing this. Like, I don't think it needs to be that necessarily. It can be super organic and natural at the beginning. And over time, you start to almost build your own community, just like you've done. And I think that community aspect is key. And that's what I wanted to touch on for myself. Like I found groups of even like you and I, how we connected or others that I've connected with in the industry. The more you can connect with people, like you almost want to look at it like different groups. So you sort of have your group of the people that are similar age as you, similar career path, similar like sort of aspect of what you're trying to do at that point in your career. And then try and make friends with people that are sort of a few steps ahead of you and then even more senior, so that you can kind of have that balance of like, okay, this is maybe an end goal for someone. And then you can start to realize like, hey, maybe that's not 100% what I want to do. And then you can kind of find that like happy medium, like you're saying, of like, you start one way and your path is going to go all over the place. You're going to start as a sports doctor and end up in the event space or consulting or whatever that is. I think it really changes over time.
Yeah, and I think I like really what you said about making friends, making that community. That's what takes LinkedIn to the next level. I think a lot of people think about it transactionally, like what can I go and get out of this connection with somebody. But if you really want to build like a long-lasting relationship and a true connection, if you will, it's about building that community. It's about having that friendship, supporting other people on the app, having those conversations, and I think that's what makes it fruitful.
When I'll take the example of like a lot of people ask like, hey, can I go for a coffee? Can we have a chat? Whatever that is. And I'm sure you've done the same. I've done the same with others just to learn more about what they're doing and so on. How can someone, whether they're a high school or maybe even into college or the early years of their career where they can't necessarily add value? If you're speaking to a senior figure, they can add value of experience of all the things that they've been able to do throughout their career. How can someone as a younger person in those interactions add value or find like a unique way to approach just a regular coffee? Because I'm sure most people that are getting the message, hey, can I have a Zoom call? Can I have a coffee? It's like, yeah, I guess, but like, what am I getting out of this? I'm curious if you have some pointers on that.
Yeah, I think it's hard, one. And so, as you're going and doing that outreach, don't expect everybody to answer one. It's going to be a thing. But the people that are willing to answer usually had a similar experience where they were doing this outreach at some point. And it's almost like a giving back opportunity, I think. And so, one, show the appreciation so that they kind of fulfill that need. They're busy. They've got a lot going on. they're going to take this time out of their day to help somebody. That's kind of how they're thinking about it. And so, come prepared, one, so that their time is used valuably. Make it as easy as possible for them. So there's nothing. People have been reaching out to me a lot now since I started creating content, and some messages are very easy to respond to. One, and also to get from here's the message to this is when we're going to get on the phone, and then get on the phone and do it. And others are super long winded. I feel like I'm doing a lot of the effort to set up the call that they want to have, and I don't know the right way to say it, at that time. But I just know that if this was someone that was in a more senior position, this message would get answered. But the long one is not going to. It's too too hard. There's too much of a barrier for that person to respond. So I think you really need to, one, be short, be concise with your message. Two, take the earnest, be the one that's leading the charge and setting up the call. Like, let me know a couple times that you're available, and then I'll adjust my schedule to make it work. And then three, when you show up to the call, have questions, be prepared, know the background of the person. Like, don't come in, oh, what do you do for work? That's all on LinkedIn. Like, you should know that. Ask valuable questions and really make the most of their time so that, one, it's fruitful for you, but two, you make it easy for them, you make it fulfilling for them. And it's, becomes something that they would be willing to do with you again down the line when more questions come up, or, when you're into that next stage of your career.
And the one thing I would add to that is start small. Like, don't go for the the Tim Cook or the Steve Jobs, like these extreme high level executives. Like, just start with peers that are, even if you're at, like, for example, for yourself, you went to Clemson. Is there a Clemson alumni that's kind of just a year or two into the position that you might be interested in, where you can connect on at least something, watching the football game that weekend, whatever that is? I know for myself, like, I did a bit of a networking trip throughout Europe in the kind of early stages of getting into the sports business industry. And I think the other key thing is, now that Zoom is so available and anyone can just have a video call, I think showing up in someone else's backyard. So if you have let's say you're US based and you have a vacation in Vegas or LA or New York or whatever that is, those are big hubs for many companies, whether it's a league or a team, or even just a company or agency like yours at Octagon, where if you're in their backyard, just try and see if you can find someone that's either an assistant to an agent, or someone that's not necessarily the person to speak with, but someone in that circle that can help give you an understanding. And then I think you can build with that over time. You kind of network your own network, and it'll slowly build, where you'll have a little bit more of an established community of people that and you can start to kind of reach out further from that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that the people that are a couple levels above you are the ones that have the most relevant information for you. Like, the CEO is not going to be able to tell you how to get the coordinator job role and come in and crush it. But the person that's a coordinator now, or is, one step above that, and it's like a manager that's actually hiring the coordinators, they can tell you, this is the best way to get your foot in the door. One, this is what you need to do to succeed once you get in the door, and really, provide relevant information versus just having the title.
So let's get into that next stage. We kind of covered the high schooler, what they can do as to, like, start building on their career, get used to LinkedIn, get used to building up your resume, that sort of thing. Now getting into college. Talk to me about your experience. Like, I know you mentioned kind of first going in to become a doctor. That was kind of the plan. Things took a little bit of a turn. But what were, like, the major experiences, the things that you took advantage of that, like, really helped you, that you're looking back now and you're like, wow, I'm so glad I did that? And what are maybe some of the things where you're like, oh, maybe I should have done that? Not necessarily regretting it, but just, hey, that would have helped me a little bit more in my journey.
Yeah. So I got started on campus. My first involvement with sports was actually working with a student organization that kind of supported the athletic department with traditions on campus. So parades, homecoming, they waved the flags on the football field, doing some of these other, traditions of Clemson. And then they also were the face of the student section across every sport. So football, obviously, and basketball, the two big ones, but also soccer, baseball, tennis, you name it. They kind of had a presence there and were the student arm of the athletic department. So anybody could join. It was, for me, a great way to have people to go to the games with. Obviously, my my playing days ended with high school. But I still wanted to be involved with the sports on campus. You're going to a big sports school. That was a way for me to get involved. At the time, I had no clue, the professional benefits that would come from it. But being able to work that closely with the athletic department. And then in the second half of my freshman year, I took a leadership position within the organization. I got to work with the baseball team and the soccer team directly. And so now it's been a year. At this point, I was still thinking I was going into medicine. But I had established these connections with the athletic department, with the coaching staff for two of the teams on campus. And then when I went to go make that pivot, switch into the sports business kind of track, having those connections already opened up all the doors for me. So I did an internship with the marketing team in the athletic department, and then I ended up transitioning over and working with the soccer team, doing like player operations. And all of it stemmed from, those initial connections that I just made by, just getting involved, right? Getting involved on campus. So yeah, I think that was the biggest thing for me. Get involved. Don't be afraid to meet people, take on the challenge, be someone that is willing to talk to the people, right? There's a lot of people, 300 or 400 people in this club, this student organization. Obviously, the people in the athletic department and the coaching staff don't know all of them. But because I kind of put myself out there, showed up, that kind of opened up those doors for me. And the thing that I think something that I did really well was that I got so involved on campus. Like I was Clemson. Clemson was me for
Yeah.
4 years. I was all in on Clemson. I stayed there during the summer, still working with the soccer team. And when I went to go get my first job after school, a lot of people, when I'm going and doing interviews, they're asking me, "Oh, do you have any like professional experience?" And I said, "No, I don't. This is it. This is me, Clemson." And so something that I would recommend doing, obviously, as a college student, you do have a really unique opportunity being on campus, having access to the athletic department, to the teams on campus, the players on campus, the coaches on campus. It can be easy to just really focus on that. But there's also a ton of opportunities for college students, specifically in the professional level too. A lot of the internships are for college credit, so you have to be a college student to participate in them. And so it's easy to get experience on campus, but it's also easier to get experience professionally as a college student than after you graduate even. And so that's something that I wish I had done. Maybe that last summer, going into your senior year, you start to have a little bit of experience here. You can put forward a good resume, utilizing the experience that you've built on campus to get some professional experience is very valuable.
Talk to me about you mentioned there how you really tried to like stick out from the crowd. Like obviously being in a group like that, you had 300-400 kids, like the athletic director and so on is not going to remember all of them. When you're in those kind of situations where it feels a little bit awkward to either network, whether you're at an event or you're speaking to someone of seniority in terms of your company or your school or wherever you are, how do you like break out of your shell and start those conversations? Do you have like a little routine you do or something you try to keep in mind when you're trying to have those conversations?
Yeah, I think it starts with confidence. You have to have unwavering confidence. And confidence to me is something that you decide to have. It can be easier to make that decision in some situations than other. You can kind of prove to yourself, as you go through, that you should have the confidence. So, for example, when you're playing sports, the first time you walk onto the court as a freshman, you can decide, am I going to play with confidence or not? It's a lot harder to play with confidence when you're a freshman than when you're a senior, because when you're a senior, you've had all these experiences where you've proven to yourself, like, I can do this. I belong here. And the confidence comes easier. But even when you're a senior, you still have to decide, like, am I going to go play with confidence today or not? And you can kind of take that and apply it to anything. When you're going into a meeting, when you're going to an event where these high-level people are going to be, what self am I going to put out there? And I think choosing to be confident, having confidence in yourself, being the one to go and shake hands, being the ones to put your ideas out there when you have them. I think that really went a long way. One of the things that kind of got me the respect, I think, from these, from the coaching staff, from the athletic department, was coming with ideas and being willing to put them out there. And it kind of ruffled some feathers a little bit. I was a little freshman, didn't know anybody, and people were like, I think it almost came off as cocky to some people. Like, who does he think he is? Like, why is he going up and just talking to these people? But what I found was, even if some of my peers, maybe they thought it was a little odd at first, the people that I was going up to really appreciated it because nobody else would do that. You know what I mean? They had set this up to get feedback from the students, but the students didn't have the confidence to actually give the feedback. So I think kind of, be confident in yourself, put yourself out there, fake it till you make it if you have to. But really having those conversations is it's gonna be so fruitful.
It's funny you bring up confidence. I just had a conversation this week. Actually, it's a podcast coming out March 1st. It's with a group from Sabrina, my good friend. She started a kind of a movement, I guess you could say, called ICNC. So it's competence, not confidence. And it's the idea behind like all the years of work that she's done has brought her this confidence that she has today to be able to be an NYU professor, to be able to work in the sports business industry with brands like DAZN and Barcelona and Bayern Munich and all these different people. So that's sort of, I think, also relatable to what you were saying there, that when you were bringing these ideas to the committee or to some people at the school specifically, it's through competence. You probably went home that night and researched and thought of ideas and brainstormed and did all these things so that the next day you could come in and be prepared. So I think it's that competence goes with the confidence. They're kind of together. And I love the sports analogy that you gave with the basketball team. That I'm a soccer guy. So as soon as you get subbed on, let's say you're coming on midway through the game, you just want to make sure those first 3 or 4 touches are going to be nice, easy passes that you can make. So you just kind of pass it around the back, get used to the flow of the game. Then once you're into the flow of the game, then things can kind of take off from there, and you can really try things out, make some new moves, that sort of thing. I think that's the same with networking and trying to build on conversations. That first conversation is the worst thing ever. The first few words out of your mouth are always the ones that you're going to trip up on. Even on a podcast like this, naturally you're going to make mistakes. But the more you get into the flow of the conversation, then each one after that just becomes easier and easier and easier. And then again, what we spoke about before, as you start to build that initial network, even if it's at an event and you've just met 2 or 3 people, then you come to day 2 of that event and you already know those 2 or 3 people. So you can kind of give them a wave and they can introduce you to their friends, and you can do that to other people that you've met. And it kind of exactly what you said there, just snowballs. And I think it's a great way to look at it. It's a good kind of idea, especially for someone that's new to doing this and to becoming or kind of growing their own network. I think it's important to just have that in the back of your mind, that and everyone feels like that. It's not like you're the only one that's like insecure about it. Like no one, even if you're very experienced, likes having those conversations with strangers. But I think as you realize that everyone in the room is the same, then it kind of clears things up a bit.
Yeah, and it's just like with anything, the first time you do it is always the hardest. Like the first 10 followers you get on social media are the hardest 10 you're ever going to have. The first 10 conversations are the hardest 10 conversations you're going to have. And just knowing like it's going to pay off, I think, can help get you over that initial hesitation to kind of dive in and try something new, really.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly touch on, just because of my experience, the college versus non-college route. I think in the US and North America specifically, it's very common. Just everyone goes to college. That's kind of the next path you take after high school. But I think it's something from my perspective that unless you're like fully locked in on something, like for college, I think it's a great way to explore. Like you mentioned, like you went in, okay, I'm going to come in as a doctor. Oh wait, my plans completely changed. You start to learn your interests, what you want to do, what you want to build on. And then you leave as a totally different person after 4 years, I would say, just based on learning about yourself. I think it's a great opportunity for that. I think going the non-college route, you have to be very specific with what you're trying to do. So like for myself, I knew leaving high school, look, I want to get into the soccer world as a whole. Sure, I didn't have it fully planned out, but I had a few connections that could help me lead into something. And then I kind of just built off of that. So I'm curious to hear from your end, your views on like college versus non-college. Maybe you've seen some other people that haven't gone the college route and how things have gone for them, or just maybe some advice for someone that's kind of contemplating, look, which direction do I go here?
Yeah, if I had to put a number on it, I'd say for 95% of people, I would recommend going to college. And I think you're an anomaly. And I think to be that anomaly, there's certain characteristics that you have to have that I can see that you have, like the proactiveness, the drive, the willing to kind of take a more entrepreneurial path. Um, a lot of the opportunities are set up for college students, and so it just kind of feeds into that. But there is an issue. Working in sports traditionally is associated with a lower salary, at least in the beginning stages, compared to if you went on to work in finance, or like for me, I majored in economics. Most of my economics classmates are making more money than I am right now, and that's tough, especially when you talk about the rising cost of college. It's expensive. You're taking out loans, those sorts of things. And so, two things I always talk about are network and experience. And college really lends itself to both of those. And so I think if you're going to go to college, which I would recommend that people do, you have to go a lot deeper than just your classes if you want to get the ROI on it. So your network, obviously you're going to be exposed to an alumni base, one, tapping into that. And two, just the proximity that you have to the people in the athletic department, to the student athletes that are your classmates, to the coaching staffs. Really taking advantage of that to build a network while you're in school. It's huge advantage, huge payoff. And then the experience, we talked all about it a little bit, but great proximity to the athletic department, tons of opportunities to get your feet wet, get some experience in the sports industry, working with the teams if you want to do like operations or equipment, anything like that. And then also, like, even if you want to be an agent, get into the NIL space, you're on campus with 100 college athletes.
Especially right now.
All it takes is one, to launch your business. You talk about, a lot of the agents. What's the one guy's name? His first name's Zach. He's an agent. His first client was, football running back at Florida State. I'm blanking on the name.
Putting the pressure on you. Yeah. No, it's okay.
But his whole story is, I went to school with this guy, and I saw like he had an issue. I had like proximity to him, and I, set up some time and fixed his problem for him. And that's how I landed my first client while I was in school. And so, there's so many opportunities on a college campus within sports. Get your feet wet, get involved. And then once you have that experience in that network coming out of school, knowing that the entry-level roles are typically designed for college students, I think that's, for 95% of people, I think that's the best way to get in.
Yeah, and I think that's key. I think even touching on like your analogy there with the agent, you have to find like where are you valuable for someone else. So at the time being in college, you might be there's no real value for me now, but there's certain industries like the NIL space now, which I think is a no-brainer, where an agent might even just want someone on campus. So reaching out to agents, you can kind of go away from your college in terms of like studies and alumni and everything that you have there. Those are a ton of great resources, but you can also just start reaching out on your own. If you find someone interesting, connect with them on LinkedIn or follow their pages. And naturally, I think you can start to grow and realize like, hey, I might be valuable going to Clemson as a good football team, or a Georgia or an Alabama. Maybe someone will just want someone to be on campus. Even if I'm not paid, I'm volunteering, whatever it is, that experience is valuable. Even just being able to meet with someone on a weekly basis or be a part of a team in that sense, I think just on your own, like that can be a start to something potentially.
100%. Yeah, you basically have a hub of all this sports activity going on. And the competition is the lowest that it's going to be because a lot of it is geared towards the college, towards the college students. And so, if you're in a role where you could do something that only a college student could do, like you mentioned, being on campus like that on a weekly basis, it's a lot easier to compete with other college students while you're in college than it is to compete with the entire workforce once you graduate.
No, you're spot on. I think one of the first videos as I started scrolling your content was you were discussing resumes and like how do I make my resume stick out? And I think it's as a conversational topic, it can be considered quite boring, but I think it's an extremely important part of the application process because that's sometimes or always the first thing that someone's going to see, a hiring manager is going to see. So from your perspective, how do people approach a resume? What are things that stick out, and how, like, maybe if someone's now looking at the application process, they're starting to apply, whether it's as an intern or as their sort of first position, where do you go? How did you do it, and how can someone benefit from your lessons and your mistakes that you made?
Yeah, I think first start off with a good template. I've been shocked. For me, I had my parents helped me with my first resume, right? And they gave me this nice template from their resume, and I've used it for the past 8 years now, probably. But people will send me their resume to take a peek at, and it'll be in the wonkiest format I've ever seen. And so there's so many resources for that online. It's an easy fix. Go get a good template, start there. Then once you have that good base, and we're starting to get a little bit more nitpicky, I think two biggest things. Understand that you're only going to get about 10 to 15 seconds on average for somebody to look at your resume, just given the demand and the competition for sports jobs. So how can you stick out in those 10 to 15 seconds? First, make sure that the most relevant stuff is at the top. In my most recent video, we're talking about this. The standard layout is to have your education, your jobs, your work history, then your internships. But for me, my job was pouring concrete. That's what I did in the summer when I was in school for my first 2 years. And then my internship was working with the athletic department. There's no reason for, the first thing that somebody's reading is to know that I poured concrete. Flip it around, make sure that they're reading the most relevant part first. So, have your sports related experience at the top. Then the other big thing is to put numbers, get metrics on your resume, because it jumps out. It's eye catching. If you're scrolling through and it's just 10 sentences of bullet points, all words, it's easy to get lost. But if you're doing a quick scan and $100,000 pops out at you, that's eye catching. That gets somebody to stop and read. And so you might not be able to tie money to everything, but you can always do like client served, guest helped. Mm-hmm. So for me, like I was managing a budget, for that student organization. So it's manage $100,000 budget. And then I'm working with the soccer team, service 24 players and their families with administrative duties. Really like starting to quantify, I think gives you a lot of credibility. And so when if you just have that short amount of time, really leaning into that to make a quick impression, those are the two things I'd focus on.
I want to get into your first experience. Octagon was right after college, right? Like that was sort of your first experience?
Yes. So
can we get into like the timing in between, let's say, graduating or that last semester, getting into Octagon, how the application process worked, and just give some people I think a lot of people are tend to be in that phase or they're going to end up being in that phase. So I just want to get kind of like an experiential, like what that actually feels like, what you were going through, and then those first steps, what it took to kind of stand out. We've mentioned some of those points, and then that first initial maybe 6 months or so of getting into Octagon itself.
Yeah, that was a challenging time for me, especially coming into that last semester of college. A lot of Clemson is a huge engineering school, so a lot of my friends were doing engineering. I was an economics major, so we had a lot of finance bros in my classes. And the engineering and the finance hiring schedule, a lot of them were getting hired right at the beginning of the semester to fill their roles in May. And so I'm watching all my friends, oh, I just got my job. And I'm sitting here like I haven't even submitted an application because it's just a little bit different in the sports world. It's most of the time it's not set up like that. Teams are hiring, in April for a May start, not in January.
Yeah.
And so just naturally that was going on and starting to stress me out, of course. And then that whole semester, I was pretty dead set that I was going to work in the MLS. I was working for the soccer team at Clemson, absolutely loving what I did. And I was like, this is the next step. I'm going to keep it going. So I was doing networking calls with every MLS executive I could get on the phone with. different teams across the country, figuring out, where should I start? What kind of job should I be applying to? Do you have any tips? How can I make sure that come May, I'm sliding into one of these roles? Had some great calls, led to a lot of interviews, and May came around, and I had one job offer in Houston for a role that I wasn't really excited about. And I ended up turning it down with the hope that I was, going to land one of these other ones, and then didn't. And so now we're in June, and I was having my oh crap moment. Like, what did I get myself into here? I should have figured this out a long time ago, but now I'm kind of stuck. And there's multiple times where I about gave up on the whole sports thing. Went deep into the hiring process for a couple finance jobs, for a couple sales jobs, and I was like, I could take the money and do something else, I guess. I thought I'd kind of failed. But then I got recommended by somebody I had connected with when I was doing all my soccer research to do this training position at Octagon. So if you're interested in working at Octagon, the training position is kind of a short term, similar to an internship, but only for college graduates. And you come in, it's anywhere between 1 and like 9 months, depending on the team. And you get a taste of Octagon. You're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, but you get to learn the business and they get to learn about you. And so it's kind of trial run. If it goes well, a lot of the time it leads into a full-time role, which is why anybody that asks me about working at Octagon, that's kind of the direction I point them in. But it was pitched to me as a way to get professional experience that I was missing, if you recall, from only having that collegiate experience. It was a way to get the professional experience. It was only going to be a short term, so I wouldn't have to worry about, quitting some other job to get back into the MLS when that time came. And so I took the role, did it for a month. I lived in a hotel in Wilmington, Delaware, put on the BMW Championship, which is a PGA Tour event, and just had an incredible time and got to meet so many people at Octagon. And I was like, this is what I should be doing instead. So when my term ended, I started applying for a full-time job. It took about a month, but then I got back in. And something that I've really appreciated is just the flexibility. Being able to work in sports still and have like a normal-ish 9 to 5. Obviously, there's a lot of weeks where it's not that. When you're traveling, when you're on site, going to the sporting events, that's just part of the business. But it was a lot more of a normal lifestyle than I ever thought I'd have working in sports, and it's still been incredibly fulfilling. So I'm glad that I stuck with it, to say the least.
Yeah, so am I, because I can see with your smile on your face as you're talking about it that you're more than happy to be a part of it. I want to get into that first, like, let's say within an internship, if you're doing a 1, 3 month, 6 month internship, that first bit of time where you're just getting introduced to the company, they're getting introduced to you, you're kind of feeling each other out. How do you make yourself stand out? We kind of talked about standing out on a resume, but now you're here, you're in person, you're seeing them, the handshake has happened. Like, I want to know, as the listener, if I'm just about to start my internship, or I've just got hired and it's my first real job in the sports industry, how can I stand out within that first period of just getting to know each other?
Yeah, I think it's really simple. It's going to be a simpler answer than you're probably expecting, but you just work hard. There's the whole like work smarter, not harder, but you have to work harder before you can work smart. And when you're coming in at an entry-level role, nobody's expecting you to be an expert, right? You're getting hired at Octagon. Nobody's expecting you to hop on a client call and give them their next big revelation of what they should do with their $1 million marketing budget. There's people who've been working in the industry for 10 to 15 years to handle that. But what they really want from you is somebody that's going to work hard, and that is going to help them out, make their life easier. And it can seem like, a little bit not so exciting, right, at first when you're doing that. But I think understanding and having the perspective to know that if I work hard for these people, they're going to take care of me. Like, if I'm working hard for this guy, he's going to start to let me in on some things, help me learn, right, while I'm working hard. And then when it comes time to get hired full time, knowing that you're somebody that's helped them out, that's put in the work, I think people are a lot more likely to hire someone like that than someone who came in and tried to be the smartest guy on the job or something from that position.
We had John Guagliano on the podcast. He's the CMO at Minnesota United, and he spoke about like he doesn't want basically what you said there. He doesn't want this transformational idea from you that's going to change the trajectory of the team and make the marketing budget all of a sudden the most glorious thing that they've ever seen. He just wants someone to move the boxes. Like if you can just move the boxes from one room to the next and be super efficient at that and not have to cause any problems or anything, like that's going to get you somewhere, because then slowly you can build on that. And I think over time, that starts to formulate into more responsibility. It's like once you can handle the little things, then more and more you'll get more and more responsibility, and that you can slowly build on that. I think the other key that I've noticed is just ask questions. Like I almost call it like the curious toddler. Like as a toddler, all of it's always why, like all day. And I think the more that you can just like push aside your ego for that first 3 to 6 months or whatever that is. And I think this goes on many years into your career. The more you can just ask questions and understand what's going on, then you can start to formulate your own ideas and your opinions. You can kind of start to build on that. And I think that's where the experience really comes into play.
100%. And you'll learn. Like, this is something that I've struggled with, was this work hard before you work smart. And it's something that I've thought a lot about, because as we mentioned, like in college, I came in with these ideas and it worked for me, like got me somewhere. And so when I started, I wanted to be someone that was making an impact. And it felt like I was moving slow at first, doing some of these more mundane tasks. And even now, I'm still towards the bottom of the totem pole in the grand scheme of things, right? Like there's people below me now, but there's still a lot of people above me, right, at Octagon. And still being committed to working hard and learning, and knowing that the time, if you put in the work, if you ask those questions and learn, when it's your time to lead the pack and take charge, you'll be a lot more successful than if you didn't ask those questions, didn't put in that work, in the beginning.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot this week and last week about leadership. And they talk about how the great, like when you think of a great leader, you think of this someone that's like almighty power, that's like this figure that everyone like acknowledges and just idolizes. But really the greatest leaders are the ones that are just willing to do the nitty gritty work that no one else wants to do. And most of them have done that for so much longer than you will ever imagine doing it. And that's why they're at the position they are. And it's just it's time, it's patience. Like I think patience is also such a key trait to have in any walk of life, but I think specifically in an industry like this that's so competitive. Like you're not just going to get from intern to CEO in a couple years. Like it takes a lot of time to really build up on something, but just being consistent and being patient in that, I think it'll just grow over time, and you'll look back all of a sudden one day and be, oh yeah, I used to be an intern at this company. I think the story of can't remember his name, but the new Nike CEO, his LinkedIn literally builds up from intern to CEO, but it took a long time for him to get there. And I wish him all the best now, because it's really cool to see stories like that.
Well, and you can really see the character traits in those guys too. For me, is within my first 6 months at Octagon, we were at the Winter Classic hockey event with the NHL in Boston, and our president lives in Boston, so he popped over for the day, like, come check out what we were working on. And he picks up a box and starts carrying it around, and I was almost horrified, like, oh no, like, did I was moving the boxes fast enough, clearly, because now our president is having to carry a box. And I said something about it to my manager, and he was like, oh, like, that's just the way things work here. The people that have made it to the top, they used to be the ones moving the boxes. And so it's, part of the culture almost. And I think it's present across the sports industry, because that's how you make it in this industry is by working hard, by being willing to do those little things like that.
I love that. A real life reminder of something that I just have in my head. I'm glad someone actually follows that, and it's encouraging. I want to get into the content side of things. I know we briefly spoke about it at the beginning. What got you into content? It's not necessarily like, not everyone that works in the sports industry just makes content on the side. So I'm curious, what first fascinated you about making content? And then, yeah, if you just want to give us some of the highlights and how it's gone so far.
Yeah, I'm very entrepreneurial minded, and so I've tried and failed at a lot of different startup and side hustle ideas. And I saw a good video about how creating content is like the next big skill, something that would be rewarded. And so I thought, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. What can I make content about? I have a cool job. I'm super passionate about sports. It was a natural fit, but I was very nervous. So what I actually did was I went on and like made sure that it wasn't connected to my contacts, wasn't connected to my Facebook. I wanted nobody to see it, except these random people, and that made it a lot easier for me to kind of get started and start putting it out there. But the big thing for me was, like I mentioned, I grew up in a small town, didn't really understand the opportunities that were out there for me, and so I hope that, my hope was that I could provide that for somebody else, right? So, give a little bit of insight into what's out there, what you could go do within the sports industry. And then now it's kind of spiraled into talking about, different happenings within the sports business, some of the tips and tricks and whatnot that I've picked up on, taking people with me when I go on site, to some of these events. And so it's been fun. I was struggling at first, and I still have all my videos up there, but like going back to watch the first couple ones are always like such a hard watch. And I hope that in a year, the videos that I'm making now are hard watch for me, as we continue to get better at it. But I think it's been really rewarding. One, knowing, hopefully down the line it turns into a bigger business and something that can be monetized. But also, at the very least, like hearing people that reach out, that I can help or that I've shared how my videos have helped is very rewarding.
Yeah, I think we align in so many ways there. I remember when I first started with the podcast, I had a similar approach where I was like, okay, I'm so embarrassed to do this. Like, I don't want any of my friends to see it. And I kind of struggled with going back and forth with myself before actually starting. And then I realized, like, you know what? I'm going to get made fun of. But after like a month or two of doing this, everyone's going to forget. And like, no one's actually going to care that much. And it was true. After a month or so, it became this thing where it was like, okay, he's actually doing it. Like, it's not just this fad. And then now I'm almost 2 years into doing it. And it's one of those things where they're just like, oh yeah, Chad does the podcast, like whatever. And kind of the conversation moves forward. Like people, as looking at yourself, you go like, oh, everyone's going to care. But like, no one actually cares. Like there's 8 billion people on the earth. Like they don't have enough time to care about you. But slowly, I think you start to build that community. Like you mentioned, you start getting feedback back on like, oh, like people are actually appreciating what I'm putting out there. And then it becomes that conversational thing. The relationships start to build, and naturally, I think that's what we've both done. Where you start to build like these little communities of people helping each other, networking, and growing together. I want to get your feedback on someone who's maybe like a little bit hesitant in that stage right now, or they're having this conflict in their mind right now. Like, should I start? Should I not start? Like, what's your advice to someone in those shoes that are just like, hey, maybe I want to start content, but I'm not totally sure on it. They're a little bit hesitant.
Yeah, I of course would encourage someone to go for it. It really is. There's so many different ways to be rewarded by it. Whether it's building your network, building that community, whether if it does blow up and you do end up monetizing it and have a whole career from something that you just started as on a whim. It can be a little bit challenging for me. Something that I worry about and put a lot of thought into is like the confidentiality of your work and kind of sharing that side of my life. But putting in the effort to have that wherewithal and being smart about it is not that big of a lift versus all the rewards that have already happened and that I anticipate continuing to happen. And so, one, I would highly encourage it. Two, I would just really recommend that put yourself out there, if it's doing content or not doing content. But if you have an interest in something, just go for it and see where it goes. Try it out, for 6 months, for a year. And if you want to walk away from it at the end of the day, nobody's going to hold it against you, but you'll get a lot of reward out of it. And I think you'll learn a lot about yourself too.
Yeah, I think those points are clear. I think one, just start, like just post something. Like even it doesn't necessarily, we're talking like you do sort of the more short form content on Instagram Reels, TikTok, so on. I do more long form on podcasts and a little bit of short form. I know other people that just do written content. Like it doesn't have to be this like one lane of you have to make TikToks. Like that just comes to be what's more trendy. But you can start with just a simple worded, just writing out articles or writing out your thoughts on certain things that are going on, and that can slowly build over time. But I think one is just starting, and then two, find some sort of consistent pattern. Are you posting every 2 weeks? Are you posting every month? I think the more you can start to like be persistent on that, of like really making sure, okay, I'm posting every month, then people start to like come back to it almost like that part of their routine. Like, okay, I can expect an article from Ethan, or I can expect a short form video from Ethan this week on like a specific time. Like I think the more you can build that, then that community again starts to build and then eventually grow further. So I think, yeah, no, that's key. Do you want to wrap up? We have some quick fire questions and then we can head out.
Yeah, sounds good. Hit me with them.
The first one, what is something like you've had your experience in the sports business world now? What is something that people looking from the outside in don't realize about working in sports?
I think that the sports industry is glamorized, and I don't think that everybody realizes the hard work that goes on behind it. No matter what job you get in the sports industry, there's going to be a ton of cool moments. Like you're on the court, you're on the field, you're in these rooms that for me I never would have imagined being in. But there's also the moving the boxes. There's also the being the person that has to go around the 80,000 seat stadium and put a T-shirt on each chair. It's hard. It's hard work. It's a lot of effort that goes into it. It takes a lot of effort to break in, and that's only the tip of the iceberg for the amount of hard work that you're going to have to put in to succeed. And so, yes, there is a lot of glamorous moments, but I think people could use a reality check sometimes. Like it's tough work too. And if you come in with the mindset that it's only going to be these glamorous moments, those are the people that within a year have switched on and moved on to another business.
Yeah, incredibly well said. What's the most underrated habit or routine that you swear by?
Write stuff down. I have my little notebook here. It's what I live by.
I'm in the same boat. There we go.
I have 3 sections. I put my goals, 3 of them. They're quantifiable. A daily check-in with where I'm at it. A to-do list, and then a notes section. And I think that there's so much going on, in your life, a lot of distractions, a lot of different ways you can get pulled. And so if you have a moment to, reflect each morning, this is what I said I wanted to accomplish. This to-do list is how I'm going to accomplish it. And here are some notes I can take throughout the day to make sure that when I come in tomorrow, I can do this all again. I think that's how you build momentum. It's how you stay disciplined in doing those little habits, like posting every day, like, staying up to date on things. And I think there's a time where I used to do that every day and I fell off of it. And I look back at that time and can recognize that I didn't accomplish as much as I did when I was writing stuff down. And so that's kind of why I've gotten back to it.
No, that's a good one as well. And then the last one here, if you could sit down with one person for a meal, past or present, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I'm really interested in talking to Joe Pompliano. He's he's like the leading sports business guy. And I think what's valuable in talking to a guy like him, for me, obviously, it's kind of a career that I'd be interested in following. I'd want it to be a little bit different, but talking about sports business for a living, I think is cool. But also a guy like that has talked to so many people, right? Like he's got a snippet from, the 100 best minds in sports. And so I think, he would be a very, very interesting person to sit down and talk to.
I love it. Ethan, if you want to quickly shout out like your socials and any last words that you have, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, it's on TikTok and on Instagram. It's Ethan_talks_sport. So we post every day, sports business, how to break into the industry. If you're interested in working in sports, definitely check it out. And I just want to say to you, thanks for having me. I guess this was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
I'm glad. I would be happy to. I appreciate it. Thanks again, and we'll speak soon, all right?
All right. Thanks, Chad.